Uh-huh. Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening and evening, friends, and welcome to Full Record Jacket with Phil and Ben. Only problem is we ain't got Ben back, and I'm not sure if we got any Phil either. We got any Phil here? Uh-huh, baby. We got some Phil. Hello, music fans. You fans of country and rock and roll and blues and gospel and ballads. Well, I hope you like a little bit of all those because on this particular edition, I'm going to be looking at Elvis Presley for no reason other than today, on the day I'm recording this, it's the 16th of August, which is Elvis Death Day. So, not the most cheerful day for Presley fans. A lot of them do go and gather, don't they, at Graceland with their candles and everything and do a vigil. But I thought that on this particular edition we'd concentrate more on the music rather than the mourning. Let's celebrate what was great about that performer from Tupelo, Mississippi, born back in 1935, died, of course, in 1977, which is 46 years ago. I do have some very, very vague childhood memories of that event. Perhaps the first major celebrity death that I sort of had any kind of knowledge about. But let's not go into that. Let's talk music. So what I've decided to do with this is a dozen deep cuts of Elvis, and I've decided to go Uncharted. Now, without going off on a bit of too much of a tangent, I have been involved for quite a few years with hospital radio here in the UK, which is we run a charity radio station in our local hospital and entertain the patients, and that's something that happens across the UK. And going back a few years now, I did a series of programs, pre-recorded programs, called Elvis Uncharted, and they were half-hour shows in which I just delved into the Presley catalogue and had a little bit of everything in each edition. I ended up doing 24 editions of this, and it was all recorded. And a few hospital radio stations took the show. So sporadically across the UK, I can be heard on some hospital radio stations, usually sort of late at night or wherever they've got a spare slot in their schedule and haven't got anything else to put in it. You can hear half an hour of me doing Elvis Presley tracks that don't often get played on the radio. So quite a shocking thought, isn't it, really, that people are supposed to be recovering from operations and things like that, and they hear me. It's not. I don't know whether that's medically recommended, but anyway, doing that show all those years ago really focused me more on Presley. I've always been a bit of a fan. Always got into him. Got into him. Well, didn't really like him that much when I was a little kid. I did like a lot of older music and stuff from my dad's record collection, but for some reason, I didn't really get a thing for Elvis until I was about, I don't know, maybe 16, 17, 18, and then I started buying more stuff and getting a bit deeper in. But anyway, let's not waffle on about me. Let's look at these 12 tracks, which, as I said, are what they call now deep cuts. So we're going to go back first of all to 1956 on my list, and we're going to the Memphis Recording Service in 19. Sorry, it's not 56. It's 54. The Memphis Recording Service, commonly known as the Sun Studio, and Elvis, Scotty, and Bill. That's Scotty Moore on guitar and Bill Black on bass. Are making a load of recordings for singles, of course. In those days, you can get them all now on this fabulous box set called A Boy from Tupelo. But on there, you've got That's All Right Mama, Mystery Train, many of those early tracks that are quite well known if you know anything. But there's one that I've zeroed in on, Milk Cow Blues Boogie, which you don't ever hear about Milk Cow Blues Boogie. Let me tell you what Grail Marcus, the doyen of rock critics, wrote in his book Mystery Train back in the 70s, because I thought it was quite good what he says here. He says, this is an old blues song, and is much older than Elvis himself. And Greil Marcus says, Elvis charges the song, shooting that boundless well out of ahead of himself, and the three of them are off. Elvis spurs the changes with his guitar, flying all over the story he's telling. His woman is gone, and he wants her back, but he's got about 5 minutes to make up her mind, singing with the crazy shifts from high to low that with Buddy Holly sounded funny, and with Elvis sounded frightening. In 2.5 minutes, he carries his listener through anger, loss, bemusement, melancholy, violence, defiance, fatalism, menace, delight, freedom, and regret. The song is as sure and as tough a tale of breaking loose as any there is. Now, that might be overhyping it, maybe, but it's a really good track. So Milk Cow Blues Boogie is my first Elvis deep cut. Now, the next one decided to go for a song from that classic debut album, the one that The Clash paid tribute to on their London Calling cover design, the first Elvis Presley LP. But I've decided to pick actually an alternate version of Shake, Rattle and Roll. You can get it on this compilation, Today, Tomorrow and Forever. It's got 4 CDs of Elvis outtakes. So yes, and yeah, Shake, Rattle and Roll. Bill Haley and the Comets did it. Elvis does it much better, really rocks. And the outtake that I've chosen, Take 2, has got something that the master didn't have, which is a little piano solo by the pianist on that session, Shorty Long. So from 1956, Shake, Rattle and Roll is the second of my Elvis deep cuts. What have we got next? We have got a track from 1957. That's when it was recorded, but Elvis fans didn't get to hear it until 1959 when it came out on this album, A Date with Elvis. Now, this was definitely aimed at the teenage girl demographic. On this LP and its original packaging, not only did it open out gatefold style and have a picture of Elvis in his army uniform, on the back of the LP, you also got a calendar, and it was my 1960 calendar, and it was marked with that day that all the girls were waiting for, the 24th of March, 1960. That was the day that Elvis was due to come back from his US Army service. Yes, indeed. So, Is It So Strange? It's a great song. It's written by Farron Young, who's he was a country singer-songwriter. He had a hit was it in the 60s or 70s? There was a kind of a mainstream country song called It's 4 in the Morning. That was a Farron Young song. But Is It So Strange is really good ballad performance by Elvis. It's a bit of a, if we had Ben here on this edition, he'd be doing the it's that kind of Elvis performance, but a really good one. So Is It So Strange, 1957, the third of my Elvis deep cuts. For the fourth one, we are going to just after he came back from the army, because this is the LP that came out, recorded very quickly and released in the spring of 1960. Elvis is back. Yes, he was back from the army, and he was still great. This is a really good album, actually. It's if you like the sort of pop of the early 60s, and if you like Elvis's early 60s stuff, I'm thinking of things like, Marie's the Name of His Latest Flame, and Stuck on You, and that kind of sound, the Nashville sound. This has got the cream of the Nashville session musicians on this, including Floyd Kramer on piano. But this is a bluesy one, originally done by Lowell Fulsom. It's the closing track on that album, and it's Reconsider Baby. Really, really good blues performance by Elvis and the band. Apparently it was recorded at the end of an all-night session at about 7 o'clock in the morning, which is not unusual in Elvis world. He actually did, I think, Suspicious Minds. The final version of that was recorded at about 7 a.m. as well. But Reconsider Baby, really good. And it also features a bluesy sax solo from another of the great Nashville session men, Boots Randolph on sax. So Reconsider Baby, another of my Elvis dozen deep cuts. Now, for 1964, we got a song that I first heard on this box that I showed you at the start of the show. This came out in 94, The complete 60s masters. So it's the essential 60s masters. I bought this box set back in 1994. It had 5 CDs in it and a book written by Peter Guralnick, who wrote the definitive biographies of Elvis. And you got a lot of tracks on this. 130 tracks. It's all the non-movie soundtrack stuff that he did in the 60s. And It Hurts Me was written by a woman. It was written by Joy Byers, who wrote quite a few songs for Elvis, quite a few that were done in his movies. But It Hurts Me is a really good performance to show the range of what he could do and the emotional intensity that he could bring across. I think it was a B-side of something. I can't remember which single, but it also features Floyd Kramer on piano. I thought I had to have one from the early 60s that had a Floyd Kramer piano on it because he was an essential part of the Elvis sound at that time. But a great ballad performance there. It Hurts Me, 1964. Now the next one, as I just consult my list because I don't want to miss any. Run On from 1966. Now this comes from the second gospel album that Elvis made. It's called How Great Thou Art. And in typical Elvis style, it's quite a diverse selection of songs. But this one, Run On, that I've chosen, is very different, really, to any of the gospel records Elvis made or any of the other ones, because it's kind of a hellfire preacher stuff. It's got about 12 vocalists on it as well in the background choir, and it's an old one done in the what they called the Jubilee gospel tradition. And Elvis just comes across as this sort of slightly possessed hellfire preacher. Johnny Cash did this in his later years. I think Johnny Cash may have called it God's Gonna Cut You Down, but really, really good. Check that one out. Run On by Elvis. Now, also from 1966, I've got another track, which I think was recorded at the same sessions as that gospel album I just showed you, but it ended up being put on a movie soundtrack. I don't think it was even used in a movie, but it was stuck on the end of the soundtrack to the movie Spin Out, just to fill up space on the LP. And what a thing to do with Elvis's version of Tomorrow Is a Long Time by Bob Dylan. Now, this song was written by Bob Dylan in the early 60s. He never recorded it in the studio. There were so many songs Dylan wrote at that time. He didn't have room for them all on his albums, but there was a live version recorded in a folk club or something like that in the early 60s, which later came out by Bob Dylan on one of his greatest hits compilations in the 70s. But at this point, it was an unreleased Dylan song, which had been published, and it had been recorded by Odetta, the soul and R&B gospel type singer. She'd done an album of Dylan covers. Elvis liked the album. He wasn't so much into Dylan, but he liked the sort of the gospel R&B renderings of his songs. And he recorded it in a very similar arrangement with his band. So the Elvis version has a teeny bit of a country feel. It's kind of, I suppose you could describe it as a kind of a country folk, a very mellow version. And one of the longest studio tracks that Presley ever recorded. It goes on for over 5 minutes. And it's just really good. It's one of those tracks I could put on repeat and just luxuriate in the mood of this. Really great. Bob Dylan himself was very complimentary about this. He said it was one of the recordings he treasured most because he was a big Presley fan and he was really proud to have an Elvis version of one of his songs. So Tomorrow Is a Long Time, the Bob Dylan song, Elvis Presley's 1966 version, takes us about halfway through my dozen deep cuts. Now, the next one, it is a deep cut, this one, because it was on an album. It's on a very highly regarded album, came out in 1969. This is from Elvis in Memphis. This is the LP that came out off the back of his 1968 TV special. You remember that, the black leather TV show where he's wearing the black leather outfit and all that stuff. Not long after that, early 69, he went into the studio, made, well, most famously In the Ghetto and Suspicious Minds, but the LP that came off those sessions was also very good, from Elvis in Memphis. And this track, Long Black Limousine, at one time this was my very favourite Presley performance. It's just really, really good. It's kind of a very mournful country style song, but with horns on it as well. It was recorded at American Sound in Memphis, so it's got a bit of it's a bit gospely, it's a bit country, and it's this tale of a girl who's died. She went off to make it big in the city, and then she's ended up in a car crash after a drunken party and died. And then her funeral cortege is coming back to the small town that Elvis's character is from, and he's watching her cortege coming through. So it's cheerful stuff, but it's a really great performance from Presley. This, and he almost brings across a kind of a weary, there's a mournfulness and almost an indignation and a sort of anger that this girl's died. He really lives this song out. It's a really great performance from him. One of his very best, I think. So Long Black Limousine from Presley. And I'm sticking to the same album for my next one. It's still from Elvis in Memphis. This is a song that recently got a bit more attention because Baz Luhrmann used it on his Elvis movie. And so it's a song that had been very neglected, really, for a very long time. It was actually the B-side of In the Ghetto, but I've never heard it on the radio. I've never heard it anywhere outside my own record collection until Baz Luhrmann used it in this movie. It's called Any Day Now. The music's by Burt Bacharach. And again, another really good Presley vocal performance. He really nails this and puts a lot of passion into this. So well worth checking out. Any Day Now, another Presley deep cut. So what do we got now? Oh yeah, from 1969, same set of sessions actually as the last one. Stranger in My Own Hometown. Now this is a song that came out, I think, originally on the LP back in Memphis, and there's more than one version of this, but I'm going for the jam session that came out on the box set with all of his American Sound recordings from early 1969. And this is a sort of a 5-minute jam. They used this as the basis of the master recording of the song. They added horns onto it and added a few overdubs onto it. But I like the original jam, which is just what actually went down in the studio between Elvis and the musicians. In fact, I did make a note of who's on this because it's quite interesting, because it wasn't Elvis's regular band. It had Reggie Young on guitar, and on bass there's a guy called Tommy Cogbill, who's the same bass player who plays on Dusty Springfield's Son of a Preacher Man and also Chain of Fools by Aretha Franklin. So he had some soul pedigree, and it's just a really good jam on this song. The song was written by Percy Mayfield, not to be confused with Curtis Mayfield. Percy Mayfield was an R&B singer, had quite a smooth gospel-y style. Elvis was a fan of him. He knew a lot of R&B stuff. And Percy Mayfield was quite a successful singer. But then at some point, I think it was in the 60s, he was involved in a car crash near Las Vegas, which basically disfigured him and really put an end to his live performing, but he continued writing songs. This is one of his songs, great version. There's also a different version of this, a slow blues version. There's an outtake, and you can find it on YouTube. I'll put a link to it. It's the X-rated version. It was recorded by Elvis and his live band when they were rehearsing for concerts in Las Vegas in early 1970. And Elvis, he liked to lark around when he was working on these rehearsals with the musicians, and he liked to make them laugh. So he does sing some quite dirty lyrics in that version. So yeah, I'll put a link to that. Stranger in My Own Hometown. What is next? I tell you, there's so many great tracks by Presley that you just never hear anywhere else. So many good performances. It's really difficult to get this down to a dozen, but I had to have this one in there because I've always liked this one from 1970. This is a song with great songwriting pedigree. It's written by Willie Nelson. Originally came out on the LP Elvis Country in 1970. The thing with the Elvis Country album is it's kind of mixed. It's got a song which threads in between the tracks and sort of comes in and out, and it kind of, some people find it a bit annoying, but you can get a version without the other bits blending into it on this compilation from Elvis in Nashville, which is all of the songs that he did over 35 songs in the space of 4 days with his band in Nashville in the summer of 1970. And this set here that I'm talking about, remixed a couple of years ago by Matt Ross Spang, really, really good. And he took all the string overdubs and some of the clutter off these, so you get to hear a slightly more stripped down version of these songs. Funny How Time Slips Away, really, really good. Kind of it's a country song. It's got a kind of a blues feel to it as well, though, and it's just quite mesmerizing. I really like this performance by Presley. It's very laid back, not as intense emotionally as a couple of the ones I just mentioned, but just a really, really good Elvis reading of a country song, which he clearly loved because he performed it on stage quite a lot as well throughout the rest of his life. So, Funny How Time Slips Away. It is funny how time slips away. I've been going for 20 minutes on this video already. Can you believe it? And we're up to the last track. And again, I had to have this one, although this isn't technically a deep cut because this was a hit single. It was a hit single in America, and I think it got into the charts in this country. Certainly got in the top 40, may have got near the top 10. Don't quote me on that, but it's Promised Land, which is a song by Chuck Berry. Chuck Berry put it out in 1964, and this is a version by Elvis and the band that he christened the TCB Band after his little personal slogan, taking care of business. And this is the band that really backed Presley throughout the 1970s at his concerts. You've got James Burton on guitar and Ronnie Tutt on drums, the two key members of this band. Jerry Sheff was the bass player live. I think in the studio sessions they sometimes use Norbert Putnam. I can't remember who plays the bass on this, but Promised Land, you can get it on this. Elvis at Stax. And the Promised Land and the Good Times LPs and the Raised on Rock LPs are pretty good. But when you have all the sessions together, these are the sessions he did at Stax Studios in Memphis in 73. When you hear it all together, just seems to be more impressive. And this version of Promised Land, really, really good. It's kind of like a swaggering rocker from the mature Elvis. And the band just sort of attack this really well. It's just really, really good. Great guitar on it from James Burton. And there are outtake versions of this as well, a couple of alternate takes that you can find officially online. And each time they just do it really well. So Promised Land, definitely, it's one of my desert island Presley tracks, so it had to be on there. Like I say, I could have picked so many more. There are great performances from throughout Presley's career, even some of the movie soundtracks where we know he made some very, very cheesy movies in the 60s, but there's still gems on those soundtracks. And there's loads more stuff as well from the 70s that I could have picked, but we've got a dozen, so that's it. All I can say after that is thank you very much for watching, and I will be back soon with Ben. But in the meantime, tell me what you think about Elvis Presley. Be nice about him. He died 46 years ago today. But tell me if you've got any Elvis deep cuts or rarities or tracks by him that you particularly like, that you'd like to remind me about so I can go back and enjoy them again. Thank you for your comments. Thanks for following. We'll be back soon. Take care for now. Goodbye.